Welcome back to the Foundry by Forge College. Let's jump right in. Today's explainer is an absolute masterclass on managing contract dependencies in Solidity. If you've been tracking with us in the Advanced Composability Techniques module, you already know we are completely leveling up our Web3 engineering skills to build truly modular systems. So let's dive into it. Okay, picture this. You buy a brand new toaster. You bring it home, and instead of just, plugging it into a standard outlet, you decide to hardwire it directly into your house's electrical grid, and then you glue the toaster firmly to the wall. It sounds completely insane, right? I mean, what happens when a heating element breaks? Or what if you just want to upgrade to one of those fancy four-slice toasters? You'd literally have to smash open the drywall? Well, hardwiring a toaster directly into the grid is exactly like tightly coupling your smart contracts. It works perfectly, right up until the exact moment you need to change absolutely anything. Now, in our last explainer, we tackled common smart contract vulnerabilities on Solana, and fixing those critical bugs is absolutely essential. But fixing brittle, glued-together architecture, that is the very next step to true mastery. Because as we compose more and more modules together, the unpredictability that comes from hidden assumptions or these brittle direct calls actually becomes the main source of integration friction. We really need to shift our mindset away from just making the code work to architecting highly robust, composable Web3 modules. So, here's our master schematic for today's explainer. We'll cover the danger of tight coupling, universal interfaces, constructor injection, the registry alternative, and finally, testing your decoupled contracts. Section 1. The danger of tight coupling. Let's explicitly break down this concept of compile-time coupling. This happens when your consumer contract is totally locked to the exact shape and the exact address of a specific implementation contract right when you compile the code. Basically, if you call a target contract's public function directly by importing its specific concrete file, you're creating a hugely inflexible dependency. It's that toaster glued to the wall. If the target contract ever changes, or if you ever need to upgrade its logic, your caller totally breaks. You have to recompile and redeploy the entire chain of contracts. Total nightmare. Section 2. Universal interfaces, or as I like to think of them, the universal plug. Let's look at how this builds into our actual solution by contrasting the difference in how we structure our imports. On the one hand, we have the direct import. This is the painful method we absolutely want to avoid. It creates a hard dependency on the implementation details, meaning if the underlying storage layout of the service changes, your consumer might be totally compromised. But on the other side, we have the interface import. An interface is essentially the standardized electrical outlet of your smart contract architecture. It tells the consumer, hey, here are the functions you can call, and here is exactly what they return, without revealing a single thing about how they actually work under the hood. By depending only on a standardized API shape, your consumer stays completely independent of the underlying logic. Which brings us to Section 3, Constructor Injection and Pinning Dependencies. So how do we actually plug our modular appliances into these universal outlets in the real world? Well, constructor injection is a fancy academic-sounding term for what is honestly a beautifully elegant and straightforward solution. It simply means pinning a dependency address at deploy time by passing an interface reference right through the constructor. The absolutely crucial point here is that you express the dependency explicitly in the consumer's API, but you don't lock the source code to a concrete service. You're basically broadcasting to the network, hey, when you deploy me, hand me the address of any contract that perfectly fits this interface, and I promise I'll work with it. Let's systematically walk through the 3 core coding steps to implement this pattern locally. Step 1. You create IService.sol. This is your interface. It expresses the dependency contractually. Maybe it just has one simple read method called getValue. Step 2. You create Service.sol. This is your concrete implementation, the thing that actually does the heavy lifting and stores the data. And step 3, you create Consumer.sol. This consumer imports the interface, and its constructor takes an address. It immediately wraps that address in the iService type. Boom. Just like that, the consumer can now call the service without knowing a single thing about its actual underlying code. All right, Section 4, the registry alternative, focusing on dynamic resolution. Now, what if you're building a highly dynamic environment where you actually need to swap out parts while the machine is actively running? Think of this approach kind of like a smart power strip that routes power on the fly. We call this registry indirection. It means querying a trusted registry contract at runtime to dynamically grab the current service address. So instead of injecting the service address into the consumer just once when it's deployed, the consumer actively asks the central registry, hey, where is the service currently located? This completely centralizes your upgradable bindings. If you need to swap the implementation, you just update the registry once, and suddenly, like magic, all your consumer contracts automatically start talking to the new service without you needing to redeploy them at all. Let's look at this comparison table to help you choose the right tool for your specific architecture. Constructor injection binds at deploy time. It is perfect for immutability and auditability. Once it's set, it is set forever. Registry indirection, however, binds at runtime. Yes, it costs an extra call, but it's absolutely ideal for frequent implementation swaps. Mastering these exact kinds of architectural trade-offs is a massive focus in Forge College's advanced learning programs. Because it's not just about writing code that compiles, right? It's about designing resilient systems that actually survive contact with the real world. Section 5. Testing your contracts to verify decoupling. We're engineers, so we know that robust testing is how we actually prove our decoupling worked in the first place. When you run a local Hardhat deploy script, there are 3 concrete signs you need to look for to confirm your wiring succeeded. First, successful local compilation without errors. This proves your syntax is valid and your interface types align perfectly. Second, your deploy log should clearly spit out both the consumer and service addresses, along with a successful non-zero read value. And third, the holy grail, the replaceability test. If you deploy an alternate service implementation, let's just call it Service v2, and pass its new address to a new consumer, it should work perfectly without a single modification to the consumer's original source code. If you see that happen, congratulations, you've achieved true modularity. And finally, Section 6, conclusion and next steps as we wrap up. I want to cement this core architectural philosophy into your mind before we close out. If you take literally only one single thing away from this explainer, let it be this absolute golden rule of composability. Depend on interfaces, not implementations. Your consumers must remain entirely implementation agnostic to be truly modular. By relying on an IService instead of a concrete service, you push all of that dangerous tight coupling out to compile time interfaces or to narrow, highly testable registry lookups. You will save yourself and your users from the utter nightmare of embedded implementation details scattered across dozens of different contracts. So now that your contracts are beautifully decoupled and easily replaceable, a really fascinating new challenge arises. When these independent modules start calling each other in complex, layered sequences, are your nested calls actually preserving data consistency? What happens if one part of the chain fails? That is the provocative question we are going to tackle in our next lesson on multi-contract interactions. Until then, I highly encourage you to head over to forge.college to dive deeper into this subject and explore our entire library of Web3 learning tracks. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and keep building.